Da 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 da. CARM harm, CARM harm, CARM harm, ba da 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 da. CARM harm. Last we left off, Robin had acquired 10 logical fallacies, and I'm going to assume that it's a she, because Robin is sort of a girl's name. It could be a boy's name, but I'm just going to assume girl. Uh, by telling us that the criterion that Huxley gave for being agnostic, that Christianity passed with flying colors, and as she did that, she acquired 10 logical fallacies, which even one would be enough to make us skeptical of the conclusions. But there's an even deeper problem than that, and that is, why should we care what Henry Huxley has as his criterion for being agnostic? That doesn't have to be my criterion for being agnostic, or yours, or anyone else's. It's nothing more than an appeal to an authority. Who cares? So what? I don't care what he came up with. What? It's not like this is the end-all be-all standard or something. Different philosophers are going to have different ways of being agnostic, or different reasons to be agnostic, or to be skeptical for that matter, or to believe something. There's not one right, quote unquote, answer out there that I'm aware of. Now, if you think that his system is a good system, fine, great. Give the argumentation of why that system is a system that can be relied upon. Show and demonstrate how that system is reliable and how it produces results every time. But all they did here was just quote Henry Huxley and say, okay, I've quoted this guy that's was a scientist. He was, part of the atheist peoples. He's got this really harsh credentials for being agnostic. So I'm going to use his system and show how Christianity passes with flying colors, which you fail to do. But who cares? Even if you were successful at passing his system, it still wouldn't matter, because it's his system. It's not my system, and it's not my viewer's system. I wouldn't think. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. And so this is nothing more at its root an appeal to authority. But we have more. We still have criterion 2 and 3 to deal with, which were criterion 2 was when a belief is held merely to gratify desires, however deep-seated, and not because it is forced on us by evidence, and criterion 3, when belief may be taken by others to be more firmly grounded than it really is, and so come to encourage false hopes or wrong attitudes of mind. Those are his 2 criterions that Robin is going to now cover. Moving on from Huxley's first criterion brings the discussion to his second and third standards, which are nearly identical in nature. Huxley says that a belief should be discarded if the sole purpose is to satisfy some psychological desire, and if the belief is not well grounded from a reality perspective, thus producing false hopes in its target. This benchmark measure for a belief is certainly rational, as the only reason to believe anything is that that particular thing, truth claim, is true. Oftentimes, the psychiatrist Sigmund Freud is quoted to show how religion fails such a test. Speaking of religious beliefs, Freud said, "They are illusions, fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most urgent wishes of mankind. We call belief an illusion when a wish fulfillment is a prominent factor in its motivation, and in doing so we disregard its relation to reality, just as the illusion itself sets no store by verification." However, Freud's criteria do nothing to prove or disprove God, as his sword cuts in both directions. Could it not be true that atheists have wishes and urges of their own? Perhaps it is a wish that a God who will call them to account one day for the action does not exist. Such a desire can be very motivating and drive a person to hold an atheistic position. So in reality, Freud's words have no power whatsoever to determine the truth claim of Christianity are valid or not. Freud's thoughts aside, how does the New Testament stand up against Huxley's second and third standards? As does with Huxley's first measure, the New Testament does extremely well. Well, that was one long paragraph of a red herring. So we're going to go off on a tangent. We're not going to talk about Huxley anymore. We're now going to introduce Freud into the discussion, and we're going to talk about how Freud said that religion is an illusion, and then we're going to say, oh, that can cut both ways. That could be used against non-religion as well, because you could also hope that something isn't true or is true or whatever, and so therefore that's invalid. So therefore, this idea that religion could be hope or an illusion is invalid. It's one giant red herring, and it's also appeal to authority, because really, yeah, Freud was interesting, and it's debatable whether or not his ideas are still useful in psychology, but you still have to learn about them when you take psychology. I don't know how many of his ideas are still used today, but nonetheless, he was a smart guy. He moved psychology along. He got it more well known and less of a negative stigmatism attached to it, which is still a thing that we're struggling with today. I have a book called Critiques of God, and it's edited by Peter A. Angelius. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's a great book. It's got lots of stuff in it. It's got something from Freud in it. I could read the entire thing from Freud, but it wouldn't matter. Who cares what Freud says? It doesn't matter. It's his way of thinking is not necessarily my way of thinking, which essentially creates a straw man. I don't care what Huxley's criterias are. I don't care what Freud said. I care about whether or not you have any facts to back any of this up or not. That's really all that matters. What you're doing is going off on this tangent, this red herring, to talk about someone else, to try to say, well, see, his critique could be used against himself. That invalidates the argument that religion might be made up. Therefore, religion isn't made up. Therefore, our religion is really true. And because we already passed the first test, and now we're going to pass the second one and the third one, because they're basically the same. No, that's not. That's not how any of that works. Okay, if you wanted to use Huxley's criteria, and we're going to assume that you showed how it was valid and sound to do so, Freud would be irrelevant to the discussion. You wouldn't need to bring him into the equation at all, period. You wouldn't need to say, well, he said it was an illusion, but that could be the other way around too. It's just irrelevant. It's not necessary. All it is one giant red herring. But since I like to complain about stuff, I'll go ahead and address this idea anyways. So Freud said religion is an illusion, wish fulfillment, desire. And Robin's response was, well, but couldn't the atheists have wish fulfillments and wish that God wasn't real so that God wouldn't judge them? Maybe. But that assumes a bleep ton of information. That assumes that the atheist even knows about God. And it also assumes that the God is a judging God, because other religions don't have gods that judge. So maybe they've only heard about every god that doesn't judge, and they just don't believe in any of those claims. And they haven't heard about the gods that do judge claims. But let's just pretend that said atheist, who is atheist in regards to all these gods, suddenly hears about a god that judges. And in this case, it's going to be Allah. Okay. The atheist in question is going to have the same criteria that they did for that god as they did for every other god. Just because this god now judges, supposedly, doesn't mean anything more. What evidence do they have to think that this might even be real? Now, if there was such evidence, then you could say that the atheist was wishing that it wasn't real. and pretending that it wasn't real. Much like biological evolution deniers deny the evidence. They wish that it wasn't true. They pretend that it's not true. They insist that it isn't true. And they fulfill their wish fulfillment by continuing to think and say that it isn't true, in spite of the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Similar examples would be the Flat Earther Society and people that believe that they've been abducted by aliens, or people that believe that the moon is a hologram, or Christians against dinosaurs. The list goes on and on. So these people are denying reality in order to get their own mental desire fulfilled. So this assumes that the atheist somehow knows that this God could or is real, and therefore is wishing that it wasn't real, which is the lamest, overused, most boringest, tackiest, I don't know, whatever-ist tactic that I have encountered over and over again. Well, you know that God exists deep down. You're just suppressing that, or you know God exists, but you don't want to obey God, or you know that God exists, but you're in rebellion, or whatever. No, I don't. Look, if there was evidence that this was true, I wouldn't wish for it to be not true. I wouldn't hope that it wasn't true. I would accept it as true. And I would say that it's true, and I would stand by it as being true, and I would defend the truth of it. But there's nothing to go on. Your claim that of your God that judges people is the same as everyone else's claim about a God that judges people, and anybody can make that claim. So, this red herring / straw man utterly fails epically, because the only way it could possibly work is if the atheist had evidence that there was a God that judged, and then wished that there wasn't a God that judged. The atheist has no such evidence, despite what this apologist and others want you to think to the contrary. First, from a legal / historical perspective, no document from antiquity comes even close to the New Testament, where passing the general criteria for judging the validity of a historical work is concerned. The New Testament passes the bibliographical test, manuscript reliability and early dating, internal evidence test, multiple key testimonials, all of which match, and the external evidence test, outside evidence that corroborates the document's testimony, with flying colors. It's outright lie, gotta take this. Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it? Wait, you said the thing! Yeah, I said the thing before you said the thing. Ha 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 ha, goodbye. No! Stop saying that, it's not true. Saying it over and over again is not gonna make it true. None of the things that you just said are true. I know you want them to be true, just like Freud said, your wish fulfillment's being granted by you pretending that it's true. But no, none of those things are true. It doesn't pass any criteria at all. Now, the only people that are going to say otherwise are the apologists and the scholars who specialize in the New Testament. You would be very hard-pressed to find anyone else that agrees with it that isn't a Christian, that this passes the test, solely because there's miracle claims in it. You would have to ignore or discount those miracle claims in order to consider it history. And as far as having multiple eyewitnesses or multiple authors, yeah, it has multiple authors years apart from each other who clearly base their work on the preceding work, and we don't know who the bleep wrote it down, and we don't know what, if anything, was the original. So it's not, yes, it's multiple people, but it's nowhere near close to each other. There's multiple contradictions, but the things that are close together don't matter because all they're doing is copying the earliest thing. They're not like, hey, yeah, I know about this story too, and reporting on it independently of it. And you can't show that that's the case because these people lived way after the events before they wrote it down. Or at least that's the only copies that we have left. We're just supposed to believe that the disciples or apostles or whoever, or however you want to call them, wrote something down and somebody passed that on and it got passed on and on and on. Which still there would be no avoiding copyist errors. There would be no avoiding somebody saying, you know what, I don't like this verse, I'm going to remove it, or I'd rather this verse be added, I'm going to put it in, so the next person copying it copies it, and they have no idea that that's a change. Especially because the system they used was the stupidest system that you could imagine. You copy everything, and then you burn the original. Brilliant. Just brilliant. I've heard that that's how they did it. I could be wrong for the New Testament stuff, but that is one thing I've heard about how the Jewish people kept the documents intact. It's the stupidest idea ever. You keep the originals, you keep the old ones around for as long as you can, so you can go back and go, oh yeah, this is wrong. We can sort of do that today because the English translations, when you go back to the earlier text and you translate it verbatim, you see multiple changes in the English translations. That's why there's so many different English translations. So we can still see that there are changes even today being made, subtle changes in the text, but those subtle changes add up over time and change the way that you read the stories presented to you. External evidence. What external evidence? There is none. Please prove me wrong. There's nothing outside of the New Testament to support that any of the events happened, period. If I'm wrong, give me something that shows me I'm wrong. Don't just say that I'm wrong. Second, as many have said, the New Testament is not written like a lie. The New Testament writers would not have invented accounts just such. You know what? I don't care. I'm leaving that error in there. I'm not even editing it out. What's the point? I mean. Secondly, as many have said, the New Testament is not written like a lie. The New Testament writers would not have invented accounts such as Jesus being buried by a member of the Sanhedrin, women being the first witnesses of Christ's resurrection, and other such things. Rather, what is found is a strong commitment to accuracy no matter where the evidence led them. Such dedication is seen in the pen of Luke, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. It seems fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophysis, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. Luke 1:1-4. Lastly, as it's already been pointed out, the New Testament writers died for their testimony. As theologian and professor Peter Christ points out, why would the apostles lie? If they lied, what was their motive? What they got out of it was a misunderstanding, rejection, persecution, torture, and martyrdom. Hardly a list of perks. The treatment Keith lists certainly is not desirable from a psychological perspective and would produce no false hopes in the disciples, as they would obviously know their claims are false if they were lying. Adding to this argument above, we see that the New Testament accounts overcome Huxley's second and third hurdles for being agnostic. In the end, a person who claims to be agnostic about Christianity but uses Julian Huxley's own criteria for determining whether one should be agnostic will have to seriously reconsider his position. with the hard agnostic position being ruled out as self-defeating and the soft agnostic position being challenged by the compelling evidence of the New Testament, the more reasonable conclusion for the agnostic to reach, once everything has been examined, seems to be that Christianity is true. Okay, so pretty much everything Robin said here has some logical fallacy associated with it. I'll cover every single one of them and count them up. But first, let me give props where props is due. Way back when, on whatever video it was now, I said that there was this citation for this quote from Henry Huxley where he tells you how to be agnostic or what his criterion is. And here it is, Julian Huxley's Religion Without Revelation, New York, New York, Mentor Books, 1957 on page 17. Oh my word, a citation on the CARM website. Not from Slick, but Robin, good job. Why you also didn't cite where you pulled Sigmund Freud's quote from, and why didn't you also cite where you pulled Peter Christoph's quote from? No idea, but at least you cited one thing. One citation. So, yay for that one citation. Alright, now it's time to tell you all the different logical fallacies. So, the New Testament is not written like a lie. I have no idea what that statement even means, but it's an irrelevant statement. It just doesn't mean anything. Star Wars isn't written like a lie. Gone with the Wind isn't written like a lie. You could say that about just about anything. It doesn't have any real meaning to it, so it's just an irrelevancy. The New Testament writers would not have invented accounts. Special knowledge. How do you know that? They wouldn't have invented it because of the women thing that's been used in apologetics before. I don't buy it. It makes the story seem more believable to write it that way because you know that people aren't going to believe the women, and so it makes it surprising that women have seen it. Plus, it copies off of other pagan writings that use similar storytelling ways, so, you know, there's precedent set for why whoever wrote this would make it up in this way, but nonetheless, you would need special knowledge to know that it wasn't made up, and you would need special knowledge to know that it was actually written by the disciples / apostles, whatever. Then we've got a circular argument where she just quotes Luke as if that matters. Then we've got, again, this idea that people wouldn't die for something they knew was a lie, which I've already said that in and of itself is an outright lie, as well as being special knowledge that you know that they didn't know that they knew it wasn't a lie and that they actually wrote it, so that's times 2. And then you've got an appeal to authority with Peter Christoph. He has personal incredulity with why would the apostles lie, has a meaningless question when he says what their motive was, and then he says, you know, the apostles, they would have suffered all this different stuff. So that's not a list of perks. So then it goes back to the red herring from earlier where we pulled in Sigmund Freud and said, see, they weren't getting any benefit from this, so they obviously weren't lying or wish fulfillment making of the. Then we go on to that you would use Julian Huxley's criteria to determine if you would be agnostic, which is another appeal to authority, and says that if you did use that, in light of everything that I said, you would have to reconsider your position, which is a non sequitur because that doesn't follow. For those of you who are wanting to know what the score is without doing math, that is a plus 14 to the number of logical fallacies in this single tiny bit of the article that I have read. Okay, that finishes up for Robin. Unfortunately, we have to turn again to Matt Slick. He has terms and definitions listed next. There's really nothing to cover there. I think I might just skip this. The only thing I can really say about every single term and definition that he gives is he fails to cite a dictionary, except for one time. He cites. Wow, Matt Slick gives one citation. Oh my goodness, he actually gives a citation. But none of the other definitions are linked to a dictionary. Use a dictionary of philosophy. Use any dictionary. I don't know. But do I disagree with any of them? Yeah, I do. I disagree with every single one of them, even if they're all correct, because he lacked citation, which would be a formal fallacy, which I'm not counting up. But I'm just skipping that page because here are definitions that I'm going to just pretend that everyone accepts. But whether or not he'll stay consistent using these definitions will be something that we'll find out. And I then will reference back to this later when that time comes. Alright, that does it for now. Remember, unless and until I can pronounce things correctly, we must continue to blame Matt Slick. Second, as many have said, the New Testament is not written like a lie. The New Testament writers would not have invented accounts such as Jesus being burned. Oh, God. Not again.